saga is a great term. It gives you this idea of, these great monumental epics. Actually, epic and saga are different if you're a geek like me, but for most people, they sound much the same. And a lot of the students I teach, they aren't going to be teachers either. Some of them are, but many of them are going to be they're lawyers or stockbrokers or doctors, dentists. And so we really are engaged here with the liberal arts ideal, that we want people to go forth into the world and be interested in a lot of things and see the connections between various ways of looking at the world, various disciplines, various models for working through problems. Because Gettysburg College is a liberal arts college, I deal mostly with well-prepared, engaged, intelligent, non-specialists, as we would say in my field. People who are not destined to grow up to be mini-fees. My name is Fee, mini-me. Yeah. I actually did just go to a dissertation defense on Friday of one of my first students from Gettysburg College, who he was in history of the English language at 10 o'clock in the morning, the first class I taught here. And he defended his dissertation in medieval studies. He's actually an Anglo-Saxonist as well, but on Friday, and that was a great moment, and he studied with professors who are friends of mine, and that was wonderful. That's highly unusual, and as I said to my classes, I will, any of you who defend your dissertation, I will gladly cancel my classes and come to your dissertation defense, because it's just not going to be such a draw on my time that I'm not going to get my job done. Having said that, I teach a lot of people who are interested. They're interested in literature, they're interested in history, they're interested in philosophy and religion, but they're also interested in stories. And they tend to refer to the narratives, as I would say, as stories. And sometimes I laugh and I make fun of that, but I'm rather a jolly dog, and I think they know that I mean them no harm. Because, of course, stories is a good term. God's Heroes and Kings was born out of my attempt to use mythology as a rubric for understanding medieval and Renaissance literature in Britain. And it was also born out of my my travels in Britain. I got my PhD at the University of Glasgow, and I spent a lot of time in Scotland, and I'm what they call in Britain a hill walker. I'm a hiker, a mountaineer, and not a particularly good one, of course, but I love it. And one of the things about the north of Britain, the Scottish islands especially, the Shetland Islands, the Orkney Islands, is they're rather sparsely populated, and so you have a lot of great monuments that have remained there. Jarlshof in Shetland, for example, is really the greatest example of a Viking homestead. I'm going to Iceland this summer, and there are a number of sites I'm going to visit, and I do a lot of multimedia work with QTVR panoramas, so you can link with hotspots and video and so forth. And I'm very excited about going to Iceland, which in my field, it's kind of a professional embarrassment that I haven't been there before. But the thing about Iceland is that there aren't a lot of great monuments per se. While in the north of Britain, where you had really interesting indigenous populations, by which I mean the people who lived in the islands of Britain before the Celts came. 5,000 years ago. I mean, you have great Neolithic, New Stone Age monuments, Paleolithic, which is Old Stone Age. So in Orkney, for example, in the Orkney Islands, you have Skara Brae, which is a very old, very simple kind of settlement that was actually covered up by a sandstorm for thousands of years. And a farmer digging a grave for a dead cow, found this this series of interconnected underground dwellings. You also, in the same Orkney Islands, you have the greatest chambered cairn in Europe, and I should say what a chambered cairn is. A cairn can be just a pile of stones. Like if you go up into the mountains and you see and sometimes in New England I think they call them ducks actually, but they're just piles of stones. But they can be very large piles of stones, and they can mark graves, for example. And a chambered cairn is a cairn that has a chamber inside of it, and usually that's a grave. So the greatest chambered cairn still extant, still existing, still standing in relatively one piece in Europe is in Orkney, and Orkney is very, very far north. So in the winter there's very little sunlight. But on the shortest day of the year, right at the solstice, about a mile away, there's a stone behind which the sun sinks, if it's clear, which it isn't always in Scotland, but be that as it may. And right as the sun sinks past that stone, the light shoots in and through the 30-foot tunnel and illuminates the chamber of this grave. And of course, what we like to talk about in literature courses would be that this is all about death and life and the dying of the sun and the rebirth of the year, which is what the poem Sir Gawain and the Grain Connect is all about. Really, in some ways, my experience with the landscape in Britain, and also my love of the very early sagas and the myths, and my desire to use these as an organizing principle for understanding how medieval literature, all the way up medieval Renaissance literature in this vast survey course, could make sense as a coherent whole. That is one of the main reasons that I wrote the book. I have 3 small children now, so I used to write a lot at home, and now I often write in my office or wherever I can. I have a laptop, and so very often writing for me involves a lot of research ahead of time, and then writing during extended periods of time. I feel, and I know a lot of writers who feel this way, that the best way to write, of course, is to write. And you write by writing every day. I say this to my students as well. If they're working on longer projects, I often have senior theses that I advise. And if you write, of course, a page a day, in the course of a semester, you've written quite a hefty amount. Now, of course, that usually requires revision, and the thing about writing is that we have to view it as a process rather than a product. My dissertation advisor used to say, there's no such thing as a completed dissertation, only an abandoned one. As a mountaineer, I would say, I often go to my highest point. This is as high as I'm getting, and then I cut out. So revision takes a lot of time as well, but I find when I was younger, I used to write for several hours at a stretch, often late at night. Now I usually can carve out 2 or 3 hour chunks, and very often I try to do it earlier in the day. Then once I'm done with that, I feel as though I've accomplished what I needed to do for that day, and it's a very liberating feeling as well. I mean, I actually love to write. Some people will complain that that they find it painful. I find editing painful, but writing I enjoy a great deal. And a lot of the writing I do in my first book, in this book, Gods, Heroes, and Kings. It was geared towards a general audience, towards my students and non-specialist scholars perhaps, but also towards a general interested audience. I find that kind of writing a lot of fun. A lot of this book has to do with telling ancient tales and myths and then explaining the relevance, some of the mythic motifs and so forth. And so I've chosen just a very short passage that has to do with Odin, who's known in the Anglo-Saxon world as Wotan, the father of the Germanic gods. Odin's familiars. A wolf guards the westernmost door of Valhalla. An eagle circles above Odin. When he goes out of the hall into the world, the All-Father rides forth on Sleipnir, the finest of horses, whose 8 legs gallop faster than any mortal steed. At home, sitting upon Hlidskjalf, his high throne, The one-eyed god can see all that comes to pass in the worlds of gods and men. His spear Gungnir never fails to find its target, and he wears the gold bracelet Draupnir. Every 9th night, 8 equally precious rings drop from this treasure. Although he survives on wine alone, the Lord of the Slain feeds huge hunks of meat to his wolves, Freki and Geri, but they are never sated. Perched on his shoulders are Odin's ravens, Hugin and Mungin, and each day the king of the gods sets them loose to fly far and wide over Midgard, to seek out the secrets and actions of men, and to return to their master with this knowledge.